These are the notes for Chapter 6 on metabolism, energy and enzymes. The focus of the chapter is enzymes, but metabolism is referring to all the chemical reactions that occur in a cell. So on this page, just make sure that you know the definition of energy, or that energy is the ability to do work. Someone told me when I use the highlighter that it covers up the words sometimes, so I'll just underline. So energy is the ability to do work. So what kinds of work do our cells need to do? Basically, our cells have to build chemicals. Some of our cells have to contract and cause movement. Some of our cells have to send electrical signals. And some of our cells have to make enzymes and hormones and structural proteins like collagen. So any of those things that I just named are going to require energy. And there is kinetic energy and potential energy, and they give you an example here of kinetic and potential. But since we're dealing more with chemicals and chemical reactions, the way that potential and kinetic energy are related is that potential energy is stored within chemical bonds. So if you have a molecule like a carbohydrate or a protein, when it breaks down, those chemical bonds break, that energy is released. So the potential energy is stored within the chemical bonds of that molecule. But the kinetic energy, which is energy of motion, is released whenever those molecules break down. Okay, so that's basically the relationship. Potential energy is stored energy in the chemical bonds, and then kinetic energy is released when those bonds break. There are two energy laws. It's called the two laws of thermodynamics. Thermo actually means heat. Dynamics is referring to changes. So really, heat changes or energy changes. So the two laws, the first law of thermodynamics is the law of conservation of energy, and it just says that energy cannot be created or destroyed. All energy does is change from one form to another. Sometimes when we think that energy has been lost, it's just because it's been given off to the environment as heat. But that it hasn't been lost, it's just changed form. So that is the first law of thermodynamics, is that energy cannot be created or destroyed, but it can change form. And the second law of thermodynamics is the law of entropy. Now, the word entropy is not one that we say a lot or that we hear a lot, and we're not going into it's a complex topic. But I am going to tell you that entropy means disorder. Entropy means disorder. So basically, well, it's just, I guess right here is this statement in the middle. No process requiring a conversion of energy is ever 100% efficient. So what is energy efficiency? What does that mean? Well, basically, I guess the chemical reaction that our cells carry out in order to produce energy to do work is the primary chemical reaction is called cellular respiration. Let me see. I was looking to see if cellular respiration was shown. It kind of is, but I'll just talk about it. So cellular respiration is when our cells convert glucose or blood sugar into ATP and use that ATP to do work. Okay, so energy efficiency is how much of the energy that comes from the breakdown of glucose is actually used to do work and how much is given off to the environment as heat. So, cellular respiration is 39% energy efficient. That means that 39% of the energy that is produced by the breakdown of glucose is actually used to do work. And the rest, which would be 61%, is given off to the atmosphere as heat. Okay, so that is the second law of entropy, is just that the energy that's available to do work, when energy changes form, that energy available to do work is produced, but there's always a loss of energy that is available to do work. It's really important that you understand. It doesn't mean there's a loss of energy. There's a loss of energy that is available to do work, and it actually is just given off as heat. So that's what the law of entropy refers to. What you're looking at here, of course, is a representation of a plant cell carrying out photosynthesis, absorbing sunlight, and converting carbon dioxide and water into a carbohydrate, glucose or some other carbohydrate. Now, that carbohydrate is then broken down in the cells of the plant or the cells of any other type of organism. The carbohydrate is broken down in the process of cellular respiration, and ATP is produced so that the cell can do work. So if we're looking at photosynthesis, most of the energy produced in photosynthesis is not used to make carbohydrate. It is actually given off as heat. That's what we say about when we say the energy is lost, but it's not really lost. It's just changed form into heat energy, and it's just given off to the environment. Now, this example is showing you carbohydrate, which is probably glucose, enters a muscle that is in a relaxed state. This is representing a skeletal muscle that has not contracted yet. So inside these muscle cells, the carbohydrate is broken down and ATP is produced. And that ATP is used to cause the contraction of that muscle. So that part of it is the work that the cell is doing. But the rest of that energy, which is around 61%, is given off to the atmosphere as heat. So you do need to understand entropy or disorder. Every cellular process, that means it doesn't matter if it's a breakdown reaction or if it's a buildup reaction, every cellular process increases the entropy of the universe. That means the universe is always becoming more and more disordered. The energy of the universe is always increasing all the time, continuously increasing, okay? The example they give here, it says glucose breaks apart into carbon dioxide and water over time. That's what I've been telling you, cellular respiration. And glucose is more organized than its breakdown products. More organized as in the atoms in glucose are more organized than when glucose breaks apart into smaller molecules. So always in a breakdown reaction, I mean, you can look at a picture here. So this is just a model of a molecule of glucose, which has 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens. So look at that in comparison to what is produced, carbon dioxide and water. The glucose, which is the reactant in cellular respiration, is more organized. It has less entropy. But the products, carbon dioxide and water, are less organized, so they have more entropy. I'm just looking to see if there's anything. Okay. Now, in section 6.2, make sure you know the definition of metabolism is all the chemical reactions that occur in a cell. And when we have a chemical reaction, the substances that participate in the reaction, I always look at them as the ingredients, like the ingredients in a recipe, such as a cake. If the cake is the product, the ingredients are the reactants. So the reactants in the chemical reaction are on the left side of the arrow, and the products are on the right side of the arrow. So free energy is the amount of energy available to perform work. And we'll talk about that more. But reactions that break down substances into smaller substances are exergonic. Breakdown reactions release energy. So the products have less free energy than the reactants. In other words, energy is released. And then endergonic reactions require energy. So the products have more free energy than the reactants. Endergonic reactions require the input of energy. A lot of times these reactions are coupled. You have an exergonic reaction that produces or releases energy, then that energy that's released is used to power or to supply the endergonic reactions. And energy in cells comes from adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. This is a high energy compound that's produced during cellular respiration, and it is then broken down in our cells and releases free energy to our cells. So ATP is not stored by cells. It's constantly being generated and regenerated by adenosine diphosphate. So it's basically adenosine diphosphate has two phosphate groups. Let's see if there's a picture. Yeah. Okay. So adenosine diphosphate is down here at the bottom, and it has an adenine, a ribose, and two phosphate groups. And then one phosphate group is added to ADP to produce ATP, which has three phosphate groups. So every time ATP releases a phosphate, as it breaks down and that phosphate bond, that third phosphate is released from the ATP, energy is also given off as well, and that energy can be used to do work. So ATP is definitely the molecule that our cells use for energy. ATP is composed of the nucleotide adenine. There are 4 nucleotide bases. They're called adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine, A, C, G, and T. But adenine plus ribose gives you adenosine, and then attached to that adenosine are 3 phosphate groups. So this is the composition of ATP. And I told you about coupled reactions, but it mentions coupled reactions here at the bottom. Exergonic reactions release energy, and ATP is produced from that released energy. Then the ATP is used to drive endergonic reactions. So exergonic reactions drive endergonic reactions. And then on slide 16, we're looking at an illustration of a woman doing a bicep curl. So what has to happen is her bicep has to contract so she can lift this little dumbbell. And you can see what's happening inside her muscle cells in the illustration here. Basically, you've got 2 proteins that interact to cause muscle contraction. One is myosin, and the one on top is actin. And you can see in the second picture that ATP breaks apart, and that enables the myosin molecule to attach to actin and then to pull on the actin, causing a muscle contraction. So ATP is a requirement, and ATP is produced by cellular respiration. This slide number 20, is just saying that some of the chemical reactions that we study are actually a sequence or a series of chemical reactions, not just one single chemical reaction. So you have one reaction, and then after the products are produced, those products become the reactants of the next reaction. So basically A, B, C, D, E, F, and G on this page is representing Each letter represents a different chemical reaction in the metabolic pathway.